Hey, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at a level 125 Dexterity build using Death's Poker. For this build, we'll be putting 58 points into Vigor, 15 into Mind just so we can utilize our Ash of War a little bit more, 26 into Endurance, 29 into Strength, 51 into Dexterity, and 9 into Intelligence. However, we will be using this Glintstone Crown, which gives us an extra 2 points in both Endurance as well as Intelligence. As for the rest of our armor, we'll be using the Tree Sentinel armor, Nox bracelets, as well as the Tree Sentinel greaves, and that will give us 69 poise, which is enough to tank one light attack from dual-wielded straight swords. So definitely a good breakpoint there. As for our talismans, we'll be using the Erdtree's Favor +2, Crimson Amber Medallion +2, Claw Talisman, as well as the Shard of Alexander. For our flask, we'll be using the Strength Knot Crystal tier as well as the Crimson Bubble tier. I found that the Strength Knot Crystal tier gave us better scaling overall with our weapons, since we do get a C scaling in Strength for Dex Poker, but it is worth noting that it is predominantly a Dexterity scaling weapon, so if our Dex was a little bit lower, we might want to use a Dexterity Knot. I really enjoy the moveset for this weapon. So the regular Greatsword moveset is not bad. I find the crouching attack to be good. The crouching attack with the dual-wielded moveset is pretty solid. The running attack is also nice. I feel like the timing is a little bit delayed and can be nice to catch your opponent off guard. The jumping attack is definitely strong since you have the damage from both the weapons, but where it's really fun is the Ash of War. So it has two different options. One is going to be the initial flame followed up by a light attack, and then the second is going to be the initial flame followed up by a heavy attack. And the light attack does kind of the line of fire, and that's going to be really nice for zoning with your opponents. I found it to be really beneficial just because it lasts a little bit longer than I think people realize. The follow-up heavy attack is also strong because the explosion has pretty wide AoE, but it's not as strong in my opinion as the light attack. It's worth noting that the light attack has somewhat limited tracking after the initial kind of explosion that comes with just the first part of the Ash of War, whereas the heavy attack has almost 360-degree range of tracking after the initial part. So it's worth noting that you won't be able to free aim the light attack follow-up too well, but it is still, in my opinion, slightly stronger just because it lingers and can really take away space, and I think people will frequently walk into it not realizing how long it's actually there. While this isn't unique to this weapon, I do really enjoy the dual greatsword backstep attack, which does come out as a simultaneous poke with both weapons, so that's the only way to kind of access that particular move, and it can be really strong if you do manage to hit with both. That pretty much covers everything that I wanted to say about the build, moveset, and strategy we'll be employing. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to let me know in the comments, and if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I'd definitely appreciate it, but that's all I've got, so let's go ahead and jump into the invasions and arena content. Alright, so jumping into our first invasion, we have a 3v1, and this one's going to be a little bit interesting because we have a player whose character model did not sync into the game, so they are invisible for the duration of this invasion, so that definitely makes things a little bit extra difficult. I can kind of lock onto them right there at the beginning and recognize that they're in the game, and they're also just a little bit out of sync with most of their attacks in general, so that kind of complicates matters, and it just, adds an extra element of pressure to this. So fortunately, they're not super aggressive, at least at first. They're sticking mostly to casting, which is a little bit easier to deal with because at this point I deal mostly with casting based on sound. So obviously having the visual cues is extremely helpful, but I recognize most of the different sounds of the different spells, and that's something that you'll kind of come to recognize over time and will be really useful when you have players that are off screen. If you can hear the sound of Moonveil or something coming, then being able to roll at the appropriate timing based on the distance that you think they are from you is just kind of a mental calculation you'll begin to do naturally. It might sound kind of intense. I don't think everybody should go memorize incantation and spell sounds so that they know the timing, but the more you play against it, the more natural it becomes. So I'm not in too much of a bad spot, I guess you could say, playing against these players despite the fact that one is invisible. You can see there some desyncing where I just get hit with, I think it was Bloody Slash, and just, totally could not see it coming, couldn't dodge at all. So I'm really just trying to find some windows of opportunities to deliver some burst damage, so you'll see me frequently going for jump attacks in this scenario. The Phantom that I'm going for predominantly is pretty tanky. They have, well over 1,000 HP, so not your average co-opper who, is running around like 1200 vigor or something at meta level. So I definitely do need to land a couple consecutive hits on the player with the dual whips, and I also do need to avoid the incoming damage from the invisible player as well as the rivers of blood from the host. And I'm just, still kind of getting a feel for the rhythm of this fight and trying to better understand how I can kind of manage this. So the dual whips player is somebody that I'm approaching understanding that I can kind of outpoise their attack with my jumping attack, but we do get some aggression from the player with like no character model, and I'm actually able to one-shot them with the jumping attack. So once I was able to lock on, that kind of gave me some indication about where they were. I guess they had a shield up because it made the guard break sound, so my first hit didn't kill them, but I kind of thought that they might panic roll, so I went for just another jumping attack that I thought I might have the range for, and ended up one-shotting them. So that is really what made this invasion possible. It was, definitely some luck, some kind of intuition associated with just how co-oppers typically behave, and it just kind of worked out there where I landed the jumping attack and they had almost no vigor. So, not super uncommon for a caster type character to have low vigor, and that might have been something I could have done better, is to just understand that maybe the player that was invisible would have been an easier target than this player with a lot of health. And eventually when that invisible player did get aggressive, it put me in a good spot. So you did see me talisman swap there real quick, and that was just so when I used my Crimson Tears, I did get a little bit extra health from that talisman. And here I accidentally killed a host first. You can see that long trail of fire just lasted too long, but I do have just enough time to chase down the final phantom and get the third kill. Next up we have another 3v1, and this one was a little bit disjointed, so I took some time to just kind of assess where everybody was and try to understand their game plan. This player doesn't have any weapons out, so I can guess that they're going to be casting of some sort, and then we do have the host that goes for a madness incantation pretty early, so I hit them with a frost pot and just kind of knock them out of that animation and prohibit them from getting that kill. So we do have a third phantom that does come into the mix. I kind of tried to get sneaky on me with a Sacred Blade attack, but they missed with their animation, so that worked out for sure, and I was able to just kind of back up. And here what I'm doing is just trying to use this building to block the incantation that sends all those little projectiles my way. I'm forgetting the name at the moment, but this is just a nice tool to use because I really don't want to get hit with that kind of magic spam. And then here's a nice combo that I definitely like using, is going the jump attack, and then if that doesn't kill them, go for just a crouching light attack. And I found that that crouching light attack was pretty useful for panic rolls and has enough range to kind of do the trick. So once that first phantom is down, I'm able to go for the second phantom, who's using Venomous Fangs with Endure, which is definitely a strong combo, but I'm able to land another jumping attack there and frostbite them in the process, and that does enough damage to take care of the rest of their health. So I did say this was a little disjointed at the beginning, and that's mostly because this host was just hanging back. I didn't really have to fight too many different players at the same time. And then there, I kind of wait for their timing of their different attacks and set myself up so if they continue swinging, they'll get hit with a jumping attack because I have just a little bit more range. So that also worked out. Next up we have another 3v1 here, and this one was a little bit strange. We had a player that was just using the one-eyed shield, and then we have some other players, one's a caster and one's a melee player. And they the player with the shield, like, I had a very hard time killing. I think that the animation for this weapon is a little bit slower when it comes to ripostes and backstabs, so I was able to guard break the player with the shield several times, but wasn't able to grab the riposte after the weapon swap. So you'll see that and just kind of keep an eye out for it. But I was able to land a jumping attack on this player after a couple quick hits with the Death's Poker, just light attacks. And that was, I think they went for the Frostbite Ballast where they should have gone for a heal, and that kind of was their downfall. And then this mage is just, casting when they should be either running away or trying to poise break me. And so here we begin the chase down on the player with the one-eyed shield, and I switch away from my weapon so I have access to a kick, and there I kind of kick them while they're jumping, which is kind of funny, and there I get the guard break and go for the light attack but don't get the riposte. So typically you'll be able to land a riposte if your swap is fast enough, and I haven't had issues swapping like that in the past, so it makes me think that maybe the riposte animation is just a little bit slower on this weapon than some of the others, and I do believe that can kind of affect the riposte timing and backstab timing, because I had a very hard time getting backstabs with this weapon. So here we go for another guard break, another swap, and another light attack, and don't manage to get it, and I just wasn't having any luck, so I go ahead and switch over to my Misericord and get just a light attack that does the last bit of HP, and I definitely recommend utilizing something like that, either a Misericord or a thrusting sword, just something that has slightly better chase downs than this great sword, because it can be pretty tricky, and when you do go for an attack with your chase down, it can oftentimes commit you to being in one spot a little bit longer than you want to be. Next up, we have a 2v1, and I kind of just like this one because I thought it was funny. We had a player going up the elevator, and here we can see I just landed jumping attack, and kind of the animation they were stuck in got them stuck on the elevator as they go up, and then, you know, right at the end of the invasion, they come in for a jumping attack, but just get kind of kicked out of the world before they can land it. This next one is going to be well, there are 4 opponents in total, so we have, you know, this Phantom here, the host, and then 2 blues that come in throughout the course of this invasion, and it really functions as a series of one-on-ones, which is a lot of fun, I thought. So here we can kind of just see the jumping attack as an Estus punish. So really, the jumping attack is very strong, and if you're patient and just kind of wait for your opponent to go for the heal, you can frequently come in with a jumping attack. And I think these weapons are really good at helping players develop better stamina management, because if you do get kind of stuck in your animation where you're swinging both swords, or you go for a jumping attack and you aren't able to roll out and like animation cancel, you're going to be in a bad spot and really just open to incoming damage. So keeping an eye on your stamina bar is going to be super important throughout just the usage of, you know, most large dual wielded weapons. So eventually another blue does come in, and the hand is kind of, you know, lending a helping hand, I guess, and hitting the blue a little bit, but also hitting me. So I kind of switch my attention over to the blue pretty quick, landing a jumping attack, and then I go for a bit of a chase down on the host, and we kind of have some back and forth, but nothing too crazy. They go for Troll's Roar, which was kind of cool, and that moment there where I kind of jumped, I thought was going to be late enough. I thought I delayed my jump long enough, but the AoE associated with that Ash of War is just a little bit longer and more present than I was expecting. So we also have a blue that has come into the world. They're going for some of the Marika's Hammer Ash of War, as well as the Scarlet Aeona Ash of War, which can just do a ton of damage. So you know, definitely good to avoid that, and I tried to punish that there with a Frost Pot because they are stuck in that animation. Another good option would have been going for the Death's Poker light attack follow-up, which does kind of create that trail of fire, which probably could have reached them. I'm not sure about the timing on that, but it's a potential good solution. And there they just kind of mistime their roll and get hit with the jumping attack, and here the chase down on the host begins. So we do get one crouching light attack, which I really enjoy that timing and the extra spacing. And there I go for a ravioli step, but can't quite reach, and then here go again for that crouching light attack, which doesn't quite land it, but the Crimson Tears Estus punish, you know, is enough to just kind of finish them off with a jumping attack. So next up, we can kind of see some of the utility of the Death's Poker Ash of War light attack follow-up. So here we have a player that's, you know, trying to bait me towards them and knock me off this branch, but I'm actually able to kind of send that fire their way. They get hit and then stun locked from the Frostbite buildup. And that is something worth noting, is that the Ash of War does do Frostbite buildup, and that can be really useful in this context. I found that the just kind of regular hits with this don't do a ton of Frostbite buildup, so at least at this level it's a little bit slower to proc Frost than, you know, you're going to have better luck with a Freezing Pot, and it, you know, is useful to have that status effect on people as early as possible. So I definitely recommend, you know, including Frost Pots in your build if you're trying to Frost proc early, and, you know, kind of get that damage build up. And in this invasion we have a 3v1, and here you can kind of see some more of the utility associated with that light follow-up for the Ash of War, where you can kind of use that little patch of fire as a place to stand. So that can give you a little bit of safety in your environment, which is really nice. So you can kind of stand there and heal, and people aren't going to want to follow you, because if they walk on it, they'll take damage. So there I hit them with the first part of that Ash of War, but don't have enough poised to kind of follow it up with another part. So that's worth noting, is you don't have massive amounts of hyper arm when it comes to that particular Ash of War. But we do see some of the aggression from the Twin Blade player just kind of, being a little bit too much, and I'm able to land just a neutral jumping attack, which is definitely going to be pretty strong. And you are going to see a lot of jumping attacks because the moveset for this is pretty slow, and just the way that invasions go at higher levels, burst damage is really important. Here we can see a player that's not realizing that they're just standing in that Ash of War flame, and they just kind of stood there and took all the damage, I think, just without understanding that damage was still hitting them. So people being unaware of kind of the full utility, especially the light attack follow-up, which I think is a little bit less common to see than maybe the heavy attack follow-up, which is just the secondary explosion. So utilizing that light attack follow-up, I just had so much fun with it. I thought, being able to free aim it and just being able to take up some space and just how long it lingers is a lot of fun to play with. So this next invasion starts as a one-on-one. We have a player with a Moonlight Greatsword, and things get off to a pretty rough start when their two phantoms come in. I go for a weapon swap right when they come in, and then I mistime a couple of heals where I think that I'll have enough time to roll out before their jump attack hits me, and I misjudge it. And there I think that I'll be able to stun lock my opponents. It doesn't work out. So here again, I go for a heal when I really probably shouldn't have. But on the plus side, I am getting my opponents to follow me. So having your opponents follow you through PvE is, sometimes going to be the deal breaker for success or failure when it comes to an invasion. So eventually kind of one of the phantoms is like, yeah, I don't want to go down there, which was probably the right call, and that means that I've isolated this phantom with me and a bunch of PvE. So I'm kind of going for some of the slower swings that come with this weapon, but I do manage to land a free aim with the Frost Pot, and that prevents this opponent from healing, and then we do get some stun locks coming in from the PvE as well, and we just have the phantom back there kind of watching. So the rest of this invasion got a little bit ridiculous when it came to just kind of general desyncing. So you can see that Moonveil Ash of War was not timed correctly with their character model, and just the lag was definitely palpable. So dealing with that was fairly difficult, and I'm not sure if there's too much to be gleaned from it, but there is kind of one of the funniest Miyazaki shuffles that I've ever seen. So in a little bit, we'll kind of draw these opponents out into this open area, and the PvE is actually doing a little bit of help, even though they're not really delivering too much damage. I think they're kind of drawing people's aim away from me, which is great. And here we can see I get hit with Moonlight Greatsword and need to bail, and then we have the Phantom kind of out here. So I do kind of hop over the edge because I don't want to get hit with Moonveil again, and just kind of use that cover to heal. And then here we have kind of the real desync of everybody's player movement and everything. So I hit them once, and then there they get pancaked and just kind of slide across the ground and then take the rest of the damage from the jumping attack. So it kind of got lucky that I still got those hits to land. If they had been rolling or blocking or something, it's possible that damage wouldn't have gone all the way through, but it all kind of worked out in the end, and now we're finally back to one-on-one with a Rune-Arced host. And despite their Rune Arc, they don't have a ton of HP. I land a jumping attack and then followed up with that crouching light attack that I love for just a kind of post-jumping attack roll catch. So next up, we have a 2v1, and this one was just another kind of enjoyable one where we have some players that are utilizing some interesting Ashes of War choices, especially in the space that they're in. So we all kind of go for Ashes of War at the same time, where we have Phantom Slash and then Bloodhound's Fang, and their Ashes of War simultaneously get them to fall off the edge of the cliff. So I didn't have to work too hard in that one, which was great, but it was just kind of a funny moment there. Next up, we have a 2v1, and this one I tried to employ a little bit of strategy, and is also useful for just kind of better understanding the Ash of War kind of follow-up stream. So I wait for the opponent to kind of come down here and start attacking the PvE, and then I go for a free aimed follow-up light attack on that particular Ash of War, and it didn't quite work out. And I think the issue was just kind of the corner has kind of weird boxes associated with it, where that Ash of War fire can kind of get caught on the corners of walls really easily, and they'll just go up the wall rather than kind of straight out along a path. So that's just something to be aware of. And here what I'm doing is I'm just baiting my opponent to fall off the ledge. So That's kind of a common thing that will happen is when you're swinging, you won't really appreciate the forward momentum associated with your swing until you are in a ladder situation where you try to kind of hit opponents, so you're really standing close to the edge and swinging your sword, and just being a little bit close to the edge there, you can kind of swing yourself off. So I was really trying to bait that out of that player, and then I was able to land a jumping attack in the process. And this last invasion is going to be one that was definitely a little bit sweaty, and one that didn't totally work out the way that I hoped it would, but definitely was just kind of a moment where we don't give up in invasions and see what you can do until you're dead. So things started out fairly well, where I was able to land a jumping attack on the player with the Serpent Hunter Great Spear, but they quickly kind of got aggressive, and I was in a bad spot where I really needed to heal, and I had gotten hit with the Ash of War from the host. So my game plan here is to try to get some heals in and just kind of get my health back up so things can reset back to neutral. And I'm also aware of some really strong PvE in the area. So here you can see me kind of go towards that PvE and use it almost as a shield, where I assume that people aren't going to want to follow me, but we have kind of a trigger happy host who is more than willing to just kind of go into that PvE. So that allows me to get my health back up and begin going after the phantoms. So I go for another light attack follow-up, hoping that my opponents will just kind of walk into that fire, but they're pushing me more in the direction of the end of the hallway, and that's really kind of a problem. So I've got some pretty low health. I'm burning through heals, just kind of hoping that I'll be able to, either stun lock my opponents or just kind of not die from the incoming damage. So that's sometimes a calculation that you need to make. If you know you're going to get hit a couple times, it may be worth it to try go for like a double heal or something in the process, just so you can get out of the situation. And that's really what I was going for in that moment, just knowing that I was going to get hit, but hoping that the incoming heals would be enough. So at this point, I have one heal left, so I go for a talisman swap just to kind of maximize the amount of HP that I'll get back from it. And I think that if I run back into them in this situation, it's going to be an issue. So I don't think I'm going to be able to take them with, half health when things were not going my way with the amount of health that I had. So I try to, get a little bit clever. So I go for some jar cannon attacks through the PvE, because I know if they retaliate, they'll actually hit the PvE. So I find that going for strategies like this as kind of a last resort definitely makes sense, and it's not something I include in all my invasions, but I wanted to put it in this one because I just thought it was, more tactical than some of my past ones, which are more focused on fundamentals of the weapon, and sometimes you kind of need to, just really use everything at your disposal. So here we have, the host again, probably just really bothering the phantoms by getting some PvE involved. So it's kind of the second time that the host has really put the phantoms in a bad spot and kind of just, I assume, done what they didn't want to happen. So while that battle's kind of going on, I take a moment to just apply some different talismans, which allow me to use Bestial Vitality, which is going to give me some regen over time. And then I also put on the Blessed Dew Charm, which is going to just give me some more HP over time. So having something like that, just so you can kind of put yourself in, the best spot possible, is going to be helpful. And at this point, I'm able to kind of isolate this phantom here, and they get stuck in a corner. They use Endure with some fist weapons, so I do need to back off because I think that they could probably bleed me pretty quick, and they're doing quite a bit of damage, but I'm able to get in some just light attacks there, and then as they're kind of running away, I hit them with some fan daggers, and they run back towards the PvE, which definitely wasn't the right call, and kind of die in the process. And then we also have the PvE kill the other phantom as well. So I definitely would have liked to have kind of a more, more close call or more melee-based fight with that phantom, but they kind of chose to run into this really PvE intensive zone and just kind of die in the process. So you can see here just sometimes the tactics of incorporating the environment are going to be useful, and that finally leaves us with just a one-on-one. So this host definitely hasn't displayed the most kind of tactical precision throughout the course of this invasion, so I feel like I'll be in a good spot. And here I go for some light attacks. I kind of alternate between using L1 and R1, so just, you know, the single sword versus double, and I find that the timing of this can be pretty useful. There I probably should have gone for a jumping L1 rather than a jumping light attack, but it's okay. You know, I'm kind of in the driver's seat here where this phantom, or this host rather, is on low health. They don't have super strong weapons, and I'm kind of just trying to space them, not get hit, because, you know, I do want to make sure that I don't lose too much health in the process. If, you know, I need to wait to kind of find the right opportunity to kill this host, it's gonna be okay. I don't mind needing to hit them multiple times in the process as long as I'm staying alive. So we get a little bit of desync when it comes to their attacks. I'm able to throw a frost pot and just get them frostbitten, and then here just one final light attack comes out a little bit more quickly than their attack, and I'm able to kind of shut down that invasion as a win. Next up, we have our duel portion of this showcase, and this first player is going to be using dual Vike Spears, and this is going to be one of the longer duels that I've had. We both had pretty good stamina management and pretty decent spacing, so I'm able to get some damage off on my opponent pretty early, but I'm also playing, you know, pretty defensively. I don't want to get hit with a bunch of crouching L1s with the dual Vike Spears. I don't want to be getting too much of the phantom procs, and you also saw maybe at the beginning that I did put the clarifying charm on, which does give me a higher madness meter, so that means that I'm just less likely to get, you know, my madness build up full and kind of die in the process. So here we can kind of just see like a pretty controlled fight, and this isn't something that you always get in the arena, and just one of the reasons that I wanted to showcase it, where my opponent and I are both kind of playing mind games. We're not taking every single opportunity to go for an attack just when it's available, and we're also just both, I think, kind of hyper aware of our stamina, because if either of us get caught in a kind of no stamina spot, we'll be susceptible to a jumping attack, and both of us have weapons that will really deliver a ton of damage. So we've both gone for our Ashes of War kind of to no effect, and it's really just going to be a battle of mind games and well-timed attacks. So I'm able to hit my opponent a little bit more with kind of the backswing, and having a weapon that does have kind of a wider backswing is definitely helpful. My opponent goes for a Frostbite Bolus, which was probably a good move, and there I get them low enough on health where I've kind of procced their charm that gives them a little bit higher defenses when they're at low health. And here things get a little bit messier. I think we're both, you know, they're probably a little bit nervous, and I'm really kind of itching to get that last bit of HP. I'm not going for like fan daggers or anything at this point, just because I feel like that would be kind of, you know, you definitely can in an environment like this, especially if you're going against dual Vikes, but I just thought it would be more satisfying to go for the, you know, melee-based attack. So eventually we do have kind of a stationary crouching L1, and that's enough for me to jump into a nice light attack, which enough swing to kind of get my opponent down. So next up we have somebody with the halberd off stock setup, and, you know, another player with the kind of golden emblem to indicate that they're very good, and we have them using some some flaming strike, kind of a lot, so definitely something to look out for. We also have a very quick swap to a shield, setting up a parry, and I felt like I was pretty lucky to not have gotten parried there. Their timing was pretty close, and it totally caught me off guard. That was, you know, definitely a crafty swap, and one that I respected. And, you know, the things in this particular duel aren't going super well, but I have kind of been inspired by their swap to a parry shield, so I go for a swap to a parry shield as well. And things are, you know, they're definitely, they've got more health than me, and they hit me with another flaming strike twice, and I have almost no health, but that kind of sets me up to indicate that they're going to be pretty aggressive. So I finally pull that parry shield off my back and start using it. I go for a wake up with my Ash of War, and doesn't quite land, which was unfortunate. I go for a couple frost pots, and then here we have an instance where they throw fan daggers first, so I don't really feel bad about sending some fan daggers their way, and we kind of get the kill there. So I was definitely happy about the successful parry, and it was kind of a close call. Definitely a dangerous setup to be facing Flaming Strike. This next duel is going to be one that's slightly less challenging. You know, we don't have kind of a meta setup. We also don't have a player that has like the gold emblem, so somebody that's a little bit newer, and maybe somebody that, you know, we can have a little bit more fun with in the process and try some things out. So you see me going for some ravioli steps and just, you know, try to have some fun with it, I guess. Try things maybe I might not normally try. There you can see me going for the heavy attack. This actually has a pretty fun heavy that has a little bit of forward momentum. And here we get a nice free-aimed follow-up light attack on the Ash of War, which kind of catches the opponent off guard and does the last bit of health. So definitely a moment there that I was pretty happy about. Next up, we have a player with Bloodhound Step as well as the Nagakiba. So those two things together can be pretty hard to deal with. Just the extra iframes that come with Bloodhound Step are still hard, especially when you're running a build that is a little bit more on the slow side. But you can kind of delay your timing until after they use Bloodhound Step if you've noticed that they're going for attacks out of Bloodhound Step frequently. So what I like to do is kind of wait for them to dash for me and then just assume that I'll be able to win a trade. So you can see there at the end, that's kind of how that goes down, where I waited for them to attack and then use Bloodhound Step, and then once they've attacked, I'm, you know, kind of swinging my swords already at them, so they've already committed, and I'm able to just trade with them and kind of win out there. So next up, we have a player with a Halberd Offstock again, and this one, it was just kind of ridiculous with the latency. So there, that jumping attack that I got very early on finally landed. So I go for a thinking emoji and, you know, just kind of try to dodge the Phantom Slash. It was surprising to me how consistent and quick their attacks were. And there, I thought I landed a jumping attack. So I kind of just spent the rest of this match waiting and hoping that they wouldn't roll or block, and that the, you know, kind of ping would eventually catch up with the duel. So there we do see that damage from the jumping attack I landed about, you know, 10 seconds earlier finally hit. Next up, we have a player with the Giant Crusher, and this player definitely played pretty well with it. So obviously it's a pretty slow weapon, and I believe they have Barbaric Roar on it, which gives it a unique heavy attack. And this was definitely requiring some spacing. They had good stamina management, as well as just kind of a good understanding of when my attacks would kind of come in. So they go for that Barbaric Roar attack, the unique heavy rather, and I don't manage to land my Ash of War on it, but it does kind of give me some insight into the timing of it, one that I'm not super familiar with this particular weapon. So Barbaric Roar can definitely give different weapon classes different timings with that unique heavy, so being aware of it and just kind of taking note of it is something that I definitely recommend. They're going for some crouch attacks, which have pretty low range, and I'm actually able to kind of follow up their Barbaric Roar buff with a nice Ravioli Step. As always, if you made it this far, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate everybody's support. And if you do have any build recommendations that you'd like to see in the future, definitely let me know in the comments. But yeah, that's all I've got, and I hope you have a good one.